Well, the Athletic is at it yet again, this time with a clickbaity anti-Big 12 headline and an emerging candidate for the Big 12 commissioner job. So there's a lot to digest here. Welcome into the channel. I am John Kurtz. As always, here on this channel, we're talking about college football, college basketball from a Big 12 slant, aiming to give the Big 12 a voice. Please do click subscribe if you have not to the channel so far. Here's what we have today. The Athletic releases an article that has 4 different stories about college football, one of them about the Big 12. Now, this was not a Max Olson piece. It's a different writer, so keep that in mind, although I'm sure Max Olson probably contributed in some way to what we have here. So we start with this. I'm going to quote from the article here. One of the more striking responses to my colleagues in my story earlier this month looking at candidates to succeed Bob Bowlesby has been the overwhelming external support for Kirk Schultz to be the next Big 12 commissioner. All right, who is Kirk Schultz, you might be asking? To somebody like myself, a Kansas State fan, that name is somebody that we know pretty well. He was at one point the president at K-State, but here's some more detail. The Washington State president, currently, he's at Washington State. The Washington State president was among the first names we all heard when compiling the candidates list, with several conversations since with folks in the industry who have worked with him paint a much stronger picture of Schultz's potential candidacy should he pursue the job. All right, so this is one of the names that I heard right away from basically everybody who threw out names speculating. Ross Dellinger, Nicole Auerbach, multiple media sources, multiple media folks out there had floated the name Kirk Schultz before. I thought just somebody who seems fairly prominent right now in the Pac-12 who has a K-State tie, and that's probably the extent of it. But now apparently that is growing even stronger. In addition to having served as K-State's president for 7 years and being one of the Pac-12 presidents who led the search to hire George Kliavkoff as commissioner, Schultz was also a part of the 4-person committee that ultimately hired Bob Bowlesby as the Big 12's commissioner in 2012. OU athletic director Joe Castiglione, Oklahoma State president Burns Hargis, and then Texas president Bill Powers were the other 3. Still from the article here. So why Schultz? For one, look at the leadership impact he's been able to have where he's been. This is the article. He is one of 3 presidents on the Pac-12 CEO Group's executive committee, and he is the conference's representative to the College Football Playoff Board of Managers. When news broke last summer of Oklahoma and Texas planning to leave the Big 12 for the SEC, Schultz played offense, criticizing the predatory nature of the SEC to the Bay Area News Group and offering Kliavkoff advice amid the period of instability nationally. Schultz, and this is true, had been at Kansas State when the Big 12 lost Colorado, Missouri, Nebraska, and Texas A&M, replacing them with TCU and West Virginia. And here's a quote. Now we start to get some of the quotes here, which are going to make you mad later. Here's a quote for right now. It says, Schultz leads the Pac-12 presidents from Washington State. If you put that into context from a footprint or athletic or academic standpoint, it doesn't make any sense. And he did it at Kansas State too, said an administrator who has worked with Schultz. But when you're in a room with the guy, he gets people to rally around things. So what that's basically saying there is like, look, he's at low profile institutions, Washington State and K-State, and still considered to be a leader. He's considered to be a leader within the Pac-12. Some of that, maybe not quite as much when he was at K-State in the Big 12, and saying if he can do that from a low profile school, this is somebody who could really lead an entire conference. That seems to be the idea. So you see the obvious ties here, K-State and the Big 12, being at K-State when realignment was happening. So he's somebody that was at a school in a pretty disadvantageous position during realignment the last time we went through a major round of that. The SEC quote, to me, I don't understand why that really gets thrown in here. All that is, to me, is like, okay, so he was willing to go talk to a reporter and say the SEC sucks. People are doing that all the time. That doesn't seem that crazy. It may just be a way to throw into the article, hey, you may know him from this. If you wanted to do that as well, it could be the handling of Nick Rolovich at Washington State and his not wanting to get vaccinated situation. That was another thing Kirk Schultz was making some headlines for. Here is more from the article, and this is where I'm going to start to get into my opinion here of Kirk Schultz, and I can give you insight as to what his time at K-State was like. It says Schultz is unlike a lot of his presidential peers when it comes to athletics, as he emphasizes how important it is for a strong university to have a strong football program. He has a disarming effect on those who have worked with him academically and athletically. He has multiple chemical engineering degrees, but can speak the language that needs to be spoken when it comes to dealing with high-profile coaches and administrators. And this is where I really raise an eyebrow. And it's like my experience with him, again, 10 years ago, well, my experience with him when he was at K-State was kind of the opposite, that he got in the way of some of the things that athletics really wanted to do. It was no secret. The reputation was out there that both, and a lot of this is about Kirk Schultz and John Curry, who was then the athletic director at K-State, now is at Wake Forest, famously was at Tennessee and got run off for trying to hire Greg Schiano. That's John Curry. Those two were tied at the hip together and producing a lot of problems for Frank Martin and Bill Snyder. Frank Martin and Bill Snyder, it was no secret, did not have great relationships with either one of these guys. And through John Curry, it was really Kirk Schultz working hand in hand with Curry to make Frank Martin's job just completely untenable until he decided to leave for a lesser job at South Carolina. So the fans absolutely hated both because of that. They didn't seem to like his yelling and cursing, just his demeanor, and they wanted him out. They wanted a more clean-cut image, and eventually it led to Frank Martin leaving. One of the big events in that being both Schultz and Curry sitting up at a podium lying about where it was that they found a money wire receipt that led to the suspension of one of K-State's best players and Frank Martin's best players the day before a round of 32 NCAA tournament game, which was, as you might have guessed, the last straw before Frank Martin decided to leave. You combine that with just some of the reputation with Bill Snyder, not liking him either. It just, they were not making life easy for athletics programs to operate the way that they really wanted to, which seems to fly in the face here of saying, hey, this is actually somebody who understands the importance of a good football program and what that could do for a university. There was some weird stuff. There was a controversy over EPAW. So K-State has this saying, EMAW, E-M-A-W, every man a Wildcat. It's been around forever, since back in the 50s and 60s. People have said it forever. And Kirk Schultz's wife came in with this push to make it EPAW, every person a Wildcat. That obviously made people very mad. There was basketball uniforms at one point. Nike was redesigning basketball uniforms. They wanted to put EMAW in it. That got nixed by President Schultz because of the EPAW push for his wife. So there were a lot of things that really bothered K-State fans. And that's why if you go look on Twitter right now, you see K-State fans' reaction to the story. It's not going to be very positive about Kirk Schultz. Now, I will throw in the caveat here that it was a long time ago. That was 10 years ago. I think about how much I've changed in 10 years. Even John Curry, who I loathed at the time, absolutely hated. I've come around to seeing some of the good things he did do, even though I always will be upset about the Frank Martin thing. My opinion on him has changed as an administrator. He has a pretty good thing rolling at Wake Forest right now. So I'm open to the fact that there could have been plenty of change here with Kirk Schultz in the last 10 years, but either way, it still seems like a fairly straightforward, boring kind of hire. I think if you're going to do that, you've got in-house candidates in the Big 12 to already do that. Kirby Hocutt, Mac Rhodes, even Oliver Luck, who's been consulting with the league. I've been of the opinion, maybe look to go somewhere outside the box. Schultz isn't that. And if you're going to stay inside the box, I think there are better in-house candidates already. Now we get to the part that I think is key here in this article and understanding how legitimate it is that Kirk Schultz is a candidate. So the article says, the Big 12 has kept mostly quiet so far as it has not yet picked a search firm to assist with the process. The expectation inside the conference is that the league will want to move fast, which probably means faster than the ACC's nearly 5 months, Big Ten's 2 months, and Pac-12's nearly 4 months searches went. So the Big 12 hasn't hired a search firm. It doesn't seem like the Big 12 is all that deep into this search. I would take the Kirk Schultz thing with a grain of salt. It was industry sources. It was not necessarily Big 12 sources that were, that's the wording here used in this article, leaking the information about Schultz. It feels to me just like he's a media darling. For whatever reason, he's a media darling. A lot of people really seem to like him or think very highly of him throughout the sport. And so because of the K-State connection and being there through realignment, the name's just going to be floated over and over by media folks. I don't take this to be like Big 12 sources are speaking a lot about this and you're getting this from people who are actually going to be in the room making that decision. I'm certainly leery of what he would be like as a commissioner. Again, you already know my opinion. I would rather see an Oliver Luck if you're going to go that kind of road, but I don't know. This makes me a little uneasy to hear, even though I think that paragraph is pretty telling about where this is coming from. And I would tell you at the end of the day, I do believe he's just a media darling and would not actually get the job. But I also don't have inside information speaking to me on that front either. Now, this is a part that's going to make you frustrated about the Athletic and the way that they framed this. And this goes back to the way that they handled realignment back in July. So from the article, it says there remains a reasonable debate to be had over how good of a job the Big 12 commissioner opening is. Quote, I don't see a high-level AD wanting to attack what's about to happen to the Big 12 right now, end quote, one industry source observed. But for most ADs and presidents, the opportunity to get away from working with campus politics every day is usually attractive enough in its own right. Okay, This is the type of thing that fuels these anti-athletic narratives from around here. Because guess what? The quote was that went out with the tweet, which is what everybody reads. Nobody reads articles, they read tweets. What went out on Twitter was the quote, "I don't see a high-level AD wanting to attack what's about to happen to the Big 12 right now," end quote. So out of this whole article, where that's a small part, and out of a situation where the Big 12 is more stable now with the 4 teams coming in, more stable than it's been in a while throughout this whole process, seemingly on the precipice of actually moving the league forward, and you're going to take that little quote from somebody in the industry, just one random quote from somebody in the industry, again, going with this narrative that woe is the Big 12, they're falling apart, when you see what's happening to the Pac-12 and you see what's happening to the ACC, that is extremely frustrating that the Athletic continues to push that. I won't scold anything or anybody that's going to get behind scolding the Athletic for that, because I think it's deserved. You know, we had the Stuart Mandel TV ratings article, which, even though he admitted was kind of out of context, never took it down, always pinned on his profile. It was the first one out there. It's what people had read. It's what formulated the narrative. You know, we're in the same kind of territory here. Everybody just sees that tweet and continues to get their jokes off at the Big 12 and say, well, look, not a good situation going on there. I'm open to a debate about how good the job actually is. In fact, already did that here on this channel. If you wanted to leave it at that, hey, there's some debate about how good of a job it actually is, and that's fine. But then just including the one quote, not getting a quote from both sides, and just one quote of somebody saying, I sure wouldn't want to take it. Okay. I mean, the other part of it is, where are the articles about the Pac-12? Like, hey, I wouldn't want to be George Kliavkoff trying to go into a negotiation right now based on what his league has been doing, not being in the playoff for 6 years. Or I wouldn't want to be the ACC right now trying to figure out how to get out of a contract that's going to have them locked up in the $30 million a year range TV-wise for the next 15 years while everybody else takes off on a rocket ship away from them. I mean, the Big 12 situation is not discernibly worse than those conferences. Anyway, finally, from the article, it says, quote, "You've got to figure out the TV deal. And if you need to add more schools for your evaluation," said an administrator who has worked in the Big 12, "you might even have to think bigger and differently about it than normal. You could also have to figure out a way to stop the poaching of the league. Colorado, Mizzou, Nebraska, A&M, Texas, and OU have all left. Why? Is it just the TV money and alignment stuff, or is there something deeper?" Well, I mean, look, I would say, yeah, there's something deeper. It's been Texas. I mean, Texas has been the genesis of a lot of these problems, 90% of the problems that the league has had since the word go. You are getting rid of Texas. There does seem to be a more unified front. That doesn't mean you're not going to have to worry about wandering eyes, Kansas especially. But for now, it seems to be more unified than it was certainly back in July and pre-adding the 4 teams. So it's frustrating. All of this article really, to me, is pretty frustrating. Keep you up to date if we hear anything else about candidates going on in the Big 12. But for now, that is the update that we do have. So what do you think about Kirk Schultz? Let me know in the comments. Like the video, really does help. Comment as much as you want. If you think I'm an idiot, whatever, let me know in the comments. And I will talk to you guys soon.